Did I spend the night in a house with a murderer? Let me start by admitting that in my early 20s, I was a complete disaster. Bad decisions were practically my specialty. Somehow, though, I survived it all. And now I've got a collection of wild stories to share. This one, however, still sends shivers down my spine. And even after all these years, I wondered just how close I came to a terrible fate. I was 21 at the time, and to put it bluntly, I was homeless. I'd hit a rough patch and found myself without a place to stay. It was one of those nights where everything felt uncertain. But I wasn't about to sit around and wallow in my misfortune. That evening, I headed to a local bar where a friend of mine was performing stand-up comedy. I'd started drinking early, around 2 p.m., and by the time the sun had set, I was more than just a little tipsy. That's when he appeared. Creepy man. He was a friend of the guy performing stand-up. He was older, probably a decade or so older than the rest of us, and something about him immediately felt off. It wasn't just his appearance, although he had this scraggly, disheveled look about him. It was the way he carried himself, the weird, unsettling vibe that surrounded him. Still, I was drunk and desperate for a distraction, so I didn't think too much about it. The night progressed, and the four of us, me, my friend, the guy performing stand-up, and creepy man, hung out at the bar until closing time. At some point, I casually mentioned that I didn't have a place to stay that night. That's when creepy man offered his place. He didn't just offer it to me, though. He invited all of us over. The way he presented it made it seem like a friendly gesture. And honestly, at that point, I didn't really care. A bed was a bed, and I needed somewhere to crash. After the bar closed, we headed to creepy man's place. As we walked, he occasionally broke out into these strange shamanic chants. He wasn't joking either. He'd close his eyes, sway a little, and hum these eerie tunes like he was channeling something from another world. It should have been a red flag, but like I said, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was tired, drunk, and desperate for a place to rest. When we finally got to his house, I remember being hit with this overwhelming sense of unease. It wasn't a bad-looking house from the outside, but something just felt off. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside and tried to stay in the moment. We all went inside, smoked some weed, and continued drinking. The weirdness didn't stop, though. Creepy man's behavior was increasingly bizarre. He would go off on these long, rambling tangents about life, death, and loss, all while pacing back and forth across the room. His eyes were intense, like he wasn't fully present in the conversation, but lost somewhere in his own head. As the night wore on, my friend who had come along decided to leave. He made some excuse about needing to be somewhere early in the morning and dipped out. That left just me, the stand-up guy, and creepy man. I should have left with my friend. I even thought about it for a moment, but I was so tired and figured it wouldn't hurt to crash on the couch for the night. So, I stayed. At some point, I passed out on the couch, the weed and alcohol finally knocking me out. When I woke up the next morning, the stand-up guy was gone. It was just me and creepy man. He came out of his bedroom shortly after I woke up, carrying a pile of women's clothes. Without missing a beat, he handed them to me and said, "These should fit you." They were in my size, which was creepy in itself, but I was too groggy to think too much about it. I thanked him and picked out an outfit, not even wondering where the clothes had come from or why he had them. In hindsight, that should have been another red flag. We started talking about my situation, and he offered for me to stay at his place as long as I needed. He told me this heartbreaking story about how he had lost his wife and kids, and how I reminded him of his daughter. There was something in the way he said it that sent a chill down my spine. But again, I was too caught up in my own predicament to think much of it. I just nodded along, grateful for the offer, even though part of me felt uneasy about staying any longer. Later that day, we left the house and met up with this schizophrenic guy who was collecting rocks by the side of the road. Creepy man knew him, and we spent some time chatting with him before heading to Burger King to split a meal. The whole day had this strange, surreal vibe to it, like I was floating through someone else's life. Nothing felt right, but nothing felt immediately dangerous either, so I went along with it. We eventually made our way back to Creepy Man's house. By now, it was getting late, and I was an hour outside of the city with no easy way to get back. He offered for me to spend another night, and I reluctantly agreed. He suggested I sleep in the spare bedroom this time, and I thought, why not? But that's when things took a really dark turn. Before bed, he asked me to help with the dishes. I agreed, of course, but then he casually mentioned that the water had been shut off. He said he had to go outside to get water from his neighbor's spigot to wash the dishes. That's when it hit me. This guy wasn't just weird. He was homeless and squatting in this house. My heart started racing. I knew something was really wrong, but I was stuck. I didn't have anywhere else to go. As I was getting ready for bed, he let me know that I could wash up using a bucket of water he had brought in from outside. I went into the bathroom, trying to keep my cool. That's when I heard him pacing the hallway outside, muttering to himself. I couldn't make out everything he was saying, but the words I did catch sent a bolt of fear through me. I'm not going to do it. Don't get any ideas. I'm not going to do it. My heart started pounding in my chest. What wasn't he going to do? Was he talking to me? Or worse, was he talking to himself, fighting off some kind of dangerous impulse? I stood there frozen, my mind racing with possibilities. Was he planning to hurt me, kill me, assault me? I had no idea. I just knew that I had to get out of there, but I couldn't leave yet. It was too late, too dark, and I didn't know how far I was from any form of safety. When I finally left the bathroom, I expected him to be standing there, maybe with a knife in hand, but he wasn't. He was sitting in the living room, still muttering to himself. When he saw me, he tried to reassure me, saying, "You're safe here. Don't worry, I'm not going to try anything. You remind me of my daughter." His words didn't bring any comfort. In fact, they made me even more terrified. He led me to the spare bedroom and opened the door. That's when he said something that made my blood run cold. "Don't be scared of the blood. It's just from some homeless men that got into a fight." I stared at him, stunned, but forced myself to stay calm. I nodded, pretending like it didn't bother me, and said goodnight. As soon as the door shut, I locked it and took a deep breath. The room was small, and as I glanced around, I saw what he had been talking about. Above the bed, there was a large blood stain on the wall, right where my head would be if I laid down. I felt sick. My mind raced as I tried to figure out how to get out of this situation. Should I leave right then? Was it too dangerous? Should I wait until morning? I made the decision to wait it out. I opened the window, removed the screen, and turned off the lights, preparing an escape route just in case. I stayed fully dressed, with my shoes on, and kept my bag close. Every noise, every creak, sent my heart racing, and I didn't sleep a wink that night. I was ready to bolt at the slightest hint of danger. Finally, dawn came. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I quietly gathered my things, tiptoed to the door, and unlocked it. Creepy man was still asleep, muttering to himself in the living room. I slipped out of the house, my heart pounding the entire time, and caught the first bus back to the city. He texted me throughout the day, asking when I was coming back, but I never responded. I ghosted him completely and never looked back. To this day, I still wonder what was going on with that man and just how close I came to being murdered, or worse, in that house.